Well, you know NBA basketball is back when the Philadelphia 76ers lose a perplexing game to a team they're definitely better than. But once again, we're left with a questionable and confusing roster and a series of what ifs and why this team isn't living up to the hype. And for me, I think it goes all the way back to Ben Simmons' rookie season in 2017-18. Back then, the Sixers had just come off a loss in 5 games, and Simmons had had pretty much the best rookie season we had seen in the last 5 to 10 years, and the future couldn't have really seemed any brighter. But things really took a turn for the better for the Sixers, even despite how good Simmons was early, when they picked up shooters Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova around the trade deadline. It kind of showed what the Sixers needed and how they could really get better. And that was the answer, was to throw shooters around Embiid and Simmons and take advantage of their elite and unique skill sets. And although Markelle Fultz's weird aside plan thing was going on, it was pretty obvious that this team had an unbelievable amount of young assets and had probably the brightest future of any young NBA team of recent memory. To make matters even more positive for the Sixers, Embiid and Simmons, despite their, clashing playing styles, had put together a net rating of 15.5 on the court together, which, for players that played over 1,200 minutes together that season, ranked second in the NBA. They were ahead of Steph and KD, Dame and CJ, Harden and Capella in Harden's MVP season. Pretty much any duo you can think of, they were ahead of, because the only one that they found themselves behind was actually Embiid and Robert Covington. So going into Simmons' second season, it seemed kind of obvious what they had to do. They brought back JJ Redick, and things kind of were on the right track. But then all of a sudden they traded for Jimmy Butler. And at the time, the trade made sense because it was an addition of talent. And as NBA fans, especially in the recent super team era, we've been trained to think that more talent is better, always. But a couple weeks later, they traded for Tobias Harris. And all of a sudden, a roster that had previously been full of role-playing shooters now lost the likes of Landry Shamet, Mike Muscala, Robert Covington, and Dario Saric, and replaced them with obviously more talented Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris. But now, franchise cornerstone Ben Simmons was clearly neglected, as his role on the team had been to fit alongside Embiid, and then when Embiid was off the floor, he could dominate with a series of role-playing shooters and he could play his style of basketball. But now his style of role players were no longer on the team, and essentially the team had built a roster that didn't even enhance their second most valuable player's assets. And the result was pretty obvious. In non-Embiid minutes, the team got destroyed because it had nothing to do with their backup center, but because they didn't have the right lineups to run around Ben Simmons. And Simmons was completely neglected, and even in the playoff series against the Toronto Raptors, he was destroyed on social media because everyone thought he was choking, when the reality is for a young player with an incredible amount of skill set, he does have one obvious flaw, which is his inability to shoot. But we know what he can do well, and instead of helping enhance that, the team made things harder on him. And of course, we know what happened next, because they got destroyed every second of the time Joel Embiid was off the floor.
The inbounder here if you're Philly.
It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
So, instead of answering the question of why this team isn't good with Embiid off the floor by recalibrating around their second young superstar, they instead tried to fill it in a stopgap move with the addition of Al Horford in a desperation ploy. And what's happened since is, coupled with the loss of Jimmy Butler and the overpaying of Tobias Harris, they have two of the worst contracts in NBA history, hardly any role-playing shooters around Simmons and Embiid, and it now looks like Simmons and Embiid can't play together, which is pretty ridiculous considering the team has done no ability to take advantage of the obvious things we knew after Simmons' rookie season, which was as you may recall from earlier in the video, throwing a bunch of role-playing shooters around them. So although maybe Covington and Saric aren't better players than Jimmy Butler, and Landry Shamet and Mike Muscala maybe not better players than Tobias Harris, losing all four for two players who need the ball in their hands and don't space the floor in the correct ways that can enhance your two best players is a bad thing for your team. And what Elton Brand has taught us, above all else in his mismanagement of this team since he took over following Simmons' rookie season, is he's overvalued talent and undervalued fit. The key thing in basketball has always been fit. It's never been just about talent. And until teams recognize this, we're going to continue to see failures like this. The Philadelphia 76ers had the obvious plan laid out in front of them. They had Dynasty written all over them. And instead of reading the obvious tea leaves, they went against what everyone knew they should do and overvalued talent and undervalued who they had in their roster. And now here they are 2 years later, completely screwed and desperate for answers, heading into a playoffs where they have probably the fourth best odds to come out of the East, when with their two best players, they should be running the East at this point.